Hello, everybody, and welcome to another scintillating, exciting, red hot episode of the Chocolate Bros podcast.
Oh, it's smoking hot in here, Adam. It's red hot.
Yes, sir.
Woo.
Love it, man. All right, and
Steamy. Jungle hot. Jungle hot.
Jungle hot?
Guys, like, come on now. We're not.
Is it so hot in the jungle that things start glowing red?
Absolutely. And by the way, we're not new at this. Let's not step all over each other. I blame myself for that, but I'm talking to myself here. So let's do this. Let's do this right, Adam.
All right, bro. So you're here with the Chocolate Bros, Brian and Adam. We're the owners of Fortunato Chocolate. Check us out at fortunatochocolate.com. Purveyors of fine chocolate using Peruvian cacao. Chocolate is made at a 100-year-old Swiss chocolate making factory in the Swiss Alps.
Absolutely.
And you can buy it online, and it is delicious.
The chocolate is delicious. The cacao comes from northern Peru. It's a variety called Nacional Puro. It's pure because it's been genetically tested and it has been shown, scientifically proven. Science, Adam. This is not me just supposing that it's the fact. This is science. This is done by the ARS, the Alternative Research Service Lab, by the USDA.
Research or agricultural research?
Agricultural, you're right. Agricultural Research Service Lab in Beltsville, Maryland, one of the premier genetic plant laboratories in the world, if not the premier. And they have done what those scientists do, the boffins, as the British call them. They've dissected or otherwise cut into tiny little pieces.
I'm pretty sure that's what they do over there.
They got the leaves and then they do some kind of sciencey thing with them. I was going to say black magic, but it's science, not magic. And then they know what they know. And what they know is that our cacao is absolutely pure Nacional cacao, the purest ever found.
There's men and women with PhDs. They're geneticists.
I've met them. Lyndall Meinhardt.
Sweet people.
Zhang Dapeng. Lyndall Meinhardt. These are people with doctors. They're
doctors. They're doctors of genetics.
Doctors of philosophy with specialties in genetics, PhD.
I gotta imagine there's a ton of petri dishes over there.
Oh, Bunsen burners and petri dishes. Yeah, kind of absolutely. Yeah.
All right, good times. So this is part 3 of a series of shows we've been doing on the entire chocolate making process. I had a customer named Greg write us, real sweet guy. And he said, hey, I love the fact that y'all are always talking about what you do in Peru and how you ferment and dry cacao beans, but how come you don't let us take a peek under the hood at the chocolate making process in Switzerland? Yes. He actually mentioned that he thought we were keeping it secret intentionally. And I think that we have now fully dispelled that assumption.
No. Actually, by the way, Greg, I want to confirm for you, that is absolutely correct. Everything that we've said in the last 2 episodes is completely false. We're just throwing you further off the trail. This has no bearing to reality. The truth is, they have a big machine. It's a box, basically, and it's impenetrable. And inside that box are gnomes, Swiss gnomes. And they put the beans in one end, the chocolate comes out the other, and no living human knows what goes on inside the box. They only know that the gnomes are in there. They demand that the beans go in one end, and they put the chocolate out on the other end.
Did you ever get into watching the movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory when you were younger?
I like that. You talk about the original or the
original? The original.
Seen them both good movies.
In the original, Willy Wonka has this rival named Duckworth, I think is his name.
I don't recall.
I think his name's Duckworth. He's always finding all these kids and offering them money to see if they will divulge the secret of the everlasting gobstopper.
The everlasting gobstopper. That's a gobstopper that does not.
So it goes in, and I remember in the movie it goes into this secret production line,
right?
And there's honking, and there's like an accordion thing that goes up. Yeah. And then it comes out the other side as everlasting gobstopper, a candy you can suck on forever, but it never. But at the end, it turns out that Ducksworth was a double agent. He actually worked for Willy Wonka. And he was trying to judge whether or not these kids would actually protect the secrets if you turn the factory over to them.
Wonka was a sly one.
And likewise, this is a whole Duckworth operation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, on behalf of Max Felkland AG, we're throwing everybody off the scent.
That's right. False flag. But here's what you didn't know until now, Adam. I'm not actually working for Felkland. I work for the gnomes.
Oh.
I work for the gnomes, Adam.
Which means what's going to follow on this podcast, there's no reason for you to even really keep listening. now that you know it's all right. It's all smoke and mirrors.
We're going to take a deep dive into the copper manometer tubing that circles on the outside of the gnome box. And I mean, we're going to dive deep into the molecular composition. No,
If you've ever wondered what shoes those gnomes are wearing, they're wooden clogs.
You don't have to wonder. They have the wooden clogs with the little curly Q toe tips on them. That's come on, Adam. You're delving into the known.
Well, what you do is you give away a piece of information. And you make it sound like you're giving away something good, but really it's common knowledge.
That's why you're sly and I'm not. So in addition, yeah. No, you got it. Multi-level.
For those who listen to this to our last podcast, similar to the way that Falkland has a separate grinding process for each sized nib. Mm-hmm. I'm working on many levels here, many levels of deception.
Multi-level, and among those levels, the next level, Adam. Your next level, baby. I love it. I love it.
All right. So where did we leave off? We
left off
on winnowing, right?
Yeah. So the winnowing process is where the shell or the chaff is separated from the bean itself, the broken little bits of bean. And at the end of that process, what you get are 4 sizes of nib. We took a little bit of an excursion into the uses of nibs and sold those the joys of nibs to the folks out there. And I reiterate that those nibs are in stock, available, and absolutely delicious in their way. They're not chocolate, they're not sweet. But they're packed full of flavor, and they're crunchy, and they add amazing texture and flavor to other things.
Yeah,
an absolute superfood.
Very nutritious.
Magnesium, manganese, iron, protein. They've fiber. They've got all this amazing
antioxidants.
Stuff. Yep, they do have that. So the ORAC scores off the charts. Adam.
I love those ORAC scores. Those are pretty cool.
I don't know the ORAC scores of our nibs, but I'm going to tell you right now, they're pretty darn high. They're high ORAC scores. Yeah.
No, they're good. Yeah, they're ORAC positive.
Mm-hmm.
If that's a way you can say that.
ORAC-alicious.
Yeah. ORAC-tastic.
Yeah. Nice.
All right.
Absolutely. So
hey, speaking of band names, what do you think about ORAC-tastic?
I don't like it. I gotta be honest. I don't care for it.
All right. Every song will be about antioxidants.
That's right. Every time you about a vitamin A. That's right.
Good time.
Yeah. So what you end up with are big bins full of nibs in 4 different sizes, from small, medium, large, medium to large. And the reason they do that is because the next step is grinding, and it's appropriate to have the nibs size. Now, this, by the way, everything that we're describing is something that takes place in a large industrial type facility that has, really, really top-notch equipment, European made, top-notch equipment. A small scale craft chocolate maker is going to have a whole different type, and we can talk about that after. We can probably
maybe do that in another episode.
Yeah, on another episode, we'll talk a little bit about some of the differences in the machinery and the outcomes. But so in this case, you go now from nibs to grind, and what you want to do is grind. And these nibs are, maybe a 32nd of an inch in millimeters. They'll be from 1 to maybe 4 millimeters in diameter. They're little craggy little chunks of roasted cocoa bean, and the idea is to get them into like a paste. The first step in grinding is to get them into a paste, and then you want to continue to grind them and get those particle sizes further and further and further smaller until it's actually a liquid, a very high viscosity, a very smooth flowing liquid where the particle size is very small, and that's called chocolate liquor. So the first thing you want to do is get to chocolate paste. And the first thing you do there is a coarse grind. Now, there are many machines that do a coarse grind, but the best one is called a roller mill. And a roller mill consists of large, probably 14-inch diameter, long, probably 6-foot long rollers, cylinders that are made of a very tough, food grade, almost impossible to damage, food grade, like a really, really hard plastic. And I should mention that once those nibs come out of that sizer, they go again through a magnetic machine which just in case any piece of non-bean material has managed to pass this far, it's likely to be a ferrous or magnetic rock. They go through a little sieve that has magnetic bars on it that would attract any, because this next step, you can't have any extraneous material in there. At this point, if there's anything extraneous in there, it's going to really damage the machinery.
Yeah, right. Whatever goes through there has to be able to be
we're talking about
and broken.
we're talking about a $2 or $3 million machine that this is about to go through, this roller mill. So what you have are these big cylinders that roll very fast around, and there are a series of, I believe it's a 7 roller. So there are 7 of these cylinders. So imagine one big cylinder, 14 inches in diameter, and then right next to it, another one, and you can adjust the distance between them. And so they would set this machine so that, so these nibs are going to pass through 2 rollers and then up through another 2 rollers and up through another 2 rollers. Each time the distance, the aperture between those cylinders gets a tiny little bit smaller.
And what makes the nib grab the roller?
It doesn't really grab the roller. You don't want it to grab the roller.
But how does it come down and come back up?
Oh, it's pressure fed. It's pressure fed. There's nowhere else for the nib to go. It gets fed in between. It backs up a little on the top side of the, so, and what you've got is these rollers are going in different directions. So they're in opposite directions. They're like this, right? And so the motion of the rollers will cause and so the path of the nibs goes down through one set of rollers and then up through another set of rollers and down through another set.
And you said that the aperture keeps getting smaller and smaller.
The aperture keeps getting smaller and smaller, and that aperture is adjustable. This machine has a programmable logic chip or PLC that controls it, and they can set it for the type of nib that's going through. So if they've got nibs that are sized to an average of 4 or 5 millimeters, the first aperture is going to be 3.5 millimeters.
So this is where the sizing comes in.
This is where the sizing comes in. So if you've got a bunch of nibs that are 1 millimeter in diameter and it's going through an aperture, they're not even going to touch anything until the 3rd roller. So you don't want to waste that mechanical energy. And I think actually, now that I'm remembering, I believe there is not a vertical. It's not horizontal. It's vertical. They pass like this down.
That makes
so there's also a gravity feed. Now that I'm remembering.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a gravity feed. So these rollers go fast. So what happens is the cacao is a solid, crunchy bunch of nibs, and then it passes through these 6 apertures.
And how wide did you say they are?
Well, the cylinders themselves are like 14 or 15 inches in diameter. They're big.
Oh, that's huge.
And they're wide.
Yeah,
and they're like 6 feet wide. There's so it's got a very high pass-through capacity. It's got a very high, and these things are spinning fast.
Yeah.
And so the nibs, like I said, they start as nibs and they pass through this thing in maybe 15, 20 seconds. And by the time they come out, they're paced. 20 seconds later, they're paced. And so this is a machine that is absolutely magnificent. It takes these solid, crunchy, hard. I mean, you can't squeeze a nib between your fingers and crack it. Break it.
Nope.
You can chew it, but it's like a very hard. Think of the cereal grape nuts for folks that haven't tried our nibs. It's like that.
Yeah, that's how I describe it too, texturally.
Yeah, they can be hard to chew sometimes. They can because there's little bits in there. The cotyledon of the seed, the germ of the seed, is actually a tiny little future trunk of a tree, and it's notably harder than the rest. And this machine just savagely lays waste to these nibs and turns them into paste very quickly. So this machine, it makes a lot of sound. And like I say, they've got a big hopper and they have a sort of a conveyor. They'll take this bin and they'll put it and they'll dump it into a hopper, and then the conveyor will convey it up to the top, and then the nibs will go through all the different apertures between the cylinders, and it comes out as a sort of a slurry or paste. It's about the consistency when it comes out of that of, what's something similar to that consistency?
Peanut butter?
No, peanut butter's thicker. This is more liquidy than peanut butter.
This is more liquidy than peanut butter.
This is like, have you ever had ice cream that's about half melted?
Yeah. What about a milkshake?
Yeah, like that. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. That's a better description. It's like a milkshake, and just like a milkshake has crystals of ice that you can kind of detect with your tongue, but it's basically a liquid.
So just those rollers, just that roller mill gets it that liquefied.
Absolutely. Yes. It's
And you know, cacao has a lot of fat in it, so that makes sense.
right. And the fat is starting to also get sort of mixed in and well distributed among the solids at this point. So it goes from, and I believe if I remember,
Bro, is this a continuous line?
Yes, this is a continuous cycle
so
machine.
the separation happens, and then it gets separated somehow.
This is a continuous processor. I mean, it doesn't run 24 hours a day, and there's always nibs going. They change.
Depending on the origin that's going through there and all that.
Also, right? and they'll clean it out with cocoa butter in between uses so that they don't flavor. Yeah, cool. Almost all chocolate machinery is cleaned in between batches with cocoa butter if you're making the kind of chocolate where the flavor is very different from one origin to the next, and Felchlin is. So they'll stop and clean this thing with cocoa butter before they run another batch. But that's why that's time consuming and expensive. So that's why they process in large quantities, batches. So for them to run a batch of our beans through there takes almost no time. And at the end, what you've got is this slurry, this paste. And that paste then goes into the next part of grinding, which is a ball mill. And the ball mill is a machine that is full of tiny, and I'm not sure which kind of ball medium they use. It's either porcelain or steel balls. I believe they use porcelain balls at Felchlin. This is a big machine. This is the size of a large barrel. You know, it's too big for me to get my hands around. And it's kind of a big cylinder, and it's full of these balls. And I'm not sure what the mechanism, but the balls are constantly moving fast in there and slamming. And the result is that these balls, and anybody that's listening can Google a ball mill, and it will a roller mill and a ball mill. And you'll be able to research these machines. You may even be able to look at images of Felchlins. They may have them posted somewhere. But would have been some good research to do before the show.
Yeah.
Bro.
Me? You're doing you're doing all the talking here.
I know, exactly. So while I'm talking, you should be doing the research. I mean, I'm carrying all the weight here, bro.
I'm asking good questions, man. I'm asking leading questions that help you.
Are you though?
That help you kind of move things along.
I know where I'm going, bro.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, I think let's pick up the pace a little bit, bro.
All right. So so it's the ball mill, and then boom, boom, bing, bam, bam, and then you got
chocolate. Yeah.
Yada yada yada. You got the chocolate.
Yeah.
No. So the ball mill has all these tiny little balls in it, and they're slamming around, and it continues to grate. If I'm not mistaken, as I recall from being at Felchlin, when the chocolate comes out of, I'm sorry, let me, cacao's fineness is expressed in microns per part, the average micron per particle. And you can measure that with a micrometer, which is a machine that kind of looks like a C-clamp, and that kind of clamps down on a tiny little bit of something, and it can measure the average particle size inside it. So finished chocolate, you want the particle size, the fineness, to be below 20 microns in average particle size. If it's above 20 microns, it'll start to feel a little coarse in your tongue.
Yeah, that's right. And what does Felchlin get it down to?
So Felchlin's average is like 14. Very, very fine, because they have the most amazing machinery.
Well, and one thing I would point out to our listeners is that Switzerland has a reputation for making chocolate with tremendous mouthfeel.
That's right.
When you eat it, it's smooth. The texture of the chocolate is an important factor for Swiss chocolate makers generally, and they have a reputation for smooth chocolate. But Felchlin in particular takes it to another level and has the machines that allow them to create something. The mouthfeel, people comment on it all the time.
It's absolutely
people come into the shop and people online comment on how smooth the texture is.
Yeah.
Of a number 4 chocolate.
And by the way, their machinery is so amazing. They actually have to limit it, because I talked to the grinder tech. They actually can grind it all the way down to 0, at which point it becomes quantum chocolate. It would pass right through your tongue without ever touching anything.
Well, at that point, it exists in 2 different places at one time.
And that's right. And you would never actually know if the chocolate was good or bad, because it exists in 2 states at once. And until it's tasted, it does not actually become good or bad.
Actually, you only statistically know how good it tastes.
That's right. Well, so they've done experiments on this. They put chocolate in a box, into quantum chocolate in a box at the Falkland factory. And there's no way to know that now that chocolate could be in the box in either of the quantum states. They call it Schrodinger's chocolate.
Yeah, you only know statistically where it is likely to be at any given time, but you couldn't actually say where it is because it doesn't actually exist.
And we won't even get into the potentially positive or negative quantum states of quantum chocolate, the lepton chocolate, muon
chocolate wormholes,
chocolate quarks.
We don't want to get into,
No.
But that's all real.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, nobody let the gnomes know that we talked about this. This is not supposed to be commented on outside the fact.
But you know where you might want to find yourself? In a chocolate black hole.
Oh boy.
Where no chocolate can escape the event horizon. So
I've been right up to that event horizon, but I got to admit, I just didn't have the courage to really commit to going in there. I mean, but it probably would have been.
No, you just stay in. You're just swimming in a stream of chocolate for all eternity in the chocolate black hole.
Which is ironically, it feels like eternity to you, but if you were to come out the other end on the other side, it'd be like in no time it even passed.
It's beautiful. So,
which brings us to the part of the conversation where we have to reflect on the nature of time itself, Adam.
Yeah, chocolate is in there somewhere. I think the last frontier in physics is figuring out how chocolate works into the entire fabric of the universe.
I think you're right, but for today's conversation, we'll just consider the nature of time to be scarce because I know you have a hard out. So
hey, prediction for the future, bro. AI, the AI machines, they discover that the fundamental building block of the universe is chocolate.
Chocolate. That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely.
You heard it here. You heard it here first.
You heard it first. I mean, by the way, I'm not saying I have access to any secret diaries of physicists. What
do the gnomes think about all this?
I can't comment about that, Adam. But let me just tell you, they've been doing their research.
Yeah, okay? It's not what they think about all this; it's what they know.
It's what they know.
Gnomes.
That's exactly right.
That's why they're called gnomes, because they are in the know.
Absolutely.
They spell it differently. That's part of them throwing you off their scent. But that's why the insiders know that gnomes is from the word know.
They actually spell it correctly. Well, they actually spell it correctly. We humans have done it the wrong way for our own nefarious reasons. But the gnomes, they know what's up.
The gnomes spell the word gnome KNOWMES. Gnomes, because they're in the know.
That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. So, leaving aside the quantum states of chocolate, we'll talk only about
what gnomes know about physics
and what gnomes know about physics. Yeah, and particle physics. We'll strictly talk about the physical chocolate that we manifest in this physical universe in our timeline.
Yeah, Newtonian chocolate. We'll just refer to it as Newtonian chocolate.
Newtonian chocolate. That's correct. Yeah. Which they typically go to about 14 microns.
A lot of people don't know because the history has been rewritten. But an apple falling from a tree.
Absolutely.
But actually, an old lady was eating a bar of chocolate on a balcony and it fell and hit Newton in the head.
That's right. The gnomes obviously covered that story up. But and by the way, for another episode, we should talk about non-Newtonian chocolate, which is really interesting because if you put it on a speaker with a heavy bass note, there are non-Newtonian liquids that will actually be liquid. And then if you put it and have a certain vibration, it becomes solid. If you take non-Newtonian chocolate, Adam, it's a solid bar, and you put the bass, goes the other direction. It becomes hot chocolate. It becomes hot chocolate, Adam, and you can drink it.
And I know you discovered that back in your funk burn days.
Absolutely. We were doing all kinds of.
There was a heavy bass line in a lot of those songs.
Heavy bass line. And this is something that people don't even like to realize, but the guy who played bass in Funk Burn, half gnome, Adam. He was a gnome. He was a human gnome hybrid. That most people don't even know about that.
For the people who haven't tuned into previous episodes, Funk was Brian's funk band that he played in while he was in college.
Absolutely, with our number one hit, "Burn Off the Funk."
Yeah, number 2 hit, Newtonian chocolate.
That's right.
And the bass player was a gnome.
He was it was half gnome, half human. He's a hybrid.
A hybrid gnome. Yeah,
he was a hybrid, absolutely. In certain cases. But I digress. Adam.
All right, so the ball mill.
The ball mill gets the cocoa paste down to, I want to say, between 90 and 120 microns of fineness. So that's a fineness.
I thought you said they got it down to 14 just now.
Well, I'm talking about the first step.
The ball mill.
I'm sorry, the roller mill. The roller mill. The paste, the slurry that comes out of the roller mill is
down to
90 to 120 microns of fineness. Okay.
Gotcha.
And that has, like you say, that has kind of the consistency of Yeah, it's more liquidy because of the fat content, but of a peanut butter, of a milkshake,
maybe a
something like
smoothie, maybe the liquid, maybe a smoothie.
Yeah.
We're thinking a smoothie.
Exactly, something like that. And then it goes into the ball mill, and I believe it comes out of the ball mill at something like 40 microns.
Oh, it comes out of the ball mill at 40.
I want to say my recollection of being there is that it comes out at about 40, and the rest of the fineness is achieved in conching, which we'll talk about in a minute. So you've got this, you're taking these solid, super crunchy, hard nibs, and you're roller milling them and you're ball milling them, and you come out with a liquid. So at the end of the ball mill, when they're at 40 degrees of fineness, that's liquid. That's a liquid.
That's a liquid.
And that can be moved through tubes. And so at that point, when it comes out of the ball mill, it goes into their internal tubing system, and it goes into a holding tank, which is a heated, a great big tank. It's, if you've ever been to a brewery, it's similar to a small beer brewing tank. It's probably
a vat.
It's a vat. It's probably, they call them holding tanks. It's similar to a vat. It's probably another 5 or 6 feet in diameter and probably 8 feet tall, something like that. And it holds, I don't know. I mean, it's probably holds a little 1,200 liters or so. So maybe 400 or 500 gallons of
cocoa mass.
Of cocoa mass, of liquor. That's right.
Yeah, liquor, cocoa liquor. Yeah.
And that's heated and stirred to remain, to keep it in its same form. It's very slowly moved, and it can stay there for as much as a few days while it's awaiting its turn to then go through the rest of the process.
Gotcha. All right. And so, yeah, just pro tip for the people, if you ever were to pick up a chocolate bar and you see one of the ingredients is cocoa liquor, then this is what we're referring to here.
That's right. And so what you've got there is a sort of an industrial product where they've taken that cocoa liquor and mixed it with other. We don't do that. Our chocolate's a little bit higher end than that, but that is.
But if you see, it, a lot of times what you'll see is something that says like chocolate, and then it has in parentheses cocoa liquor and whatever the other ingredients are. And that signifies that, yeah, they're making their chocolate by using cocoa liquor and other ingredients, but they're not making the chocolate as a cohesive whole. So, all right, bro. Absolutely.
That's right. So now you've got this cocoa liquor, and now it goes into its next cycle, which is the refiner or mélangeur. The mélangeur is a French word for, it's kind of a mixer and refiner. So this next step, there are different names for this next piece of machinery. Some people have a refiner, some people have a mélangeur. Some people have a refiner / mélangeur. Its basic purpose is to now mix the ingredients very thoroughly. So at this next stage, so let's take our 68%, which is a very easy thing to do. It's got a little bit of additional cocoa butter because it's a couverture that's made for to be friendly for pastry chefs to be able to use in recipes. So that requires a certain viscosity. So or ability to flow. You may have heard viscosity for the folks who are listening in conjunction with like motor oil. You're looking for a liquid that has a certain pattern of being able to flow very easily to kind of fill every little crevice, to coat surfaces essentially. And pastry chefs and professional chocolatiers require a certain viscosity for them to do the confections that they make with chocolate. And any chocolate that has added cocoa butter, which is almost every chocolate, is technically considered a couverture. And so ours is. It's not. Most couvertures mostly refer to chocolates that have a lot more cocoa butter added, almost as much cocoa butter as cacao.
Yeah.
Ours isn't that. Ours is eating chocolate.
Yeah. And in our case, I would point out that we're using deodorized cocoa butter here.
That's right.
So it's totally flavor neutral, the cocoa butter that's getting put in. It's purely, like you said, to affect the viscosity. And it also has, in my opinion, a beneficial effect on mouthfeel as well.
On the mouthfeel. And so what you said is something important, which is most people don't know. So there are a lot of subproducts of cacao that aren't chocolate. Cacao can be turned into a bunch of different things. And one thing that's fairly common in the industry is to take kind of lower end beans that aren't going to end up being super flavorful chocolate. And they take this cocoa liquor that I've just described, which is it flows like a liquid, and it's probably at about 40 microns of fineness. A lot of the cacao in the world gets diverted and not made into chocolate at this stage where it's liquor. it gets sold a lot of times as liquor, and it gets moved around the world in this stage in liquor. It hardens up if you don't keep it heated.
Yeah, and there's huge companies out there,
huge
that have huge mills that just make this cocoa liquor. That's what they exist for, and they sell.
Ecuador is famous for it. The African countries export a lot of this cocoa liquor,
and they sell cocoa liquor to huge chocolate companies that then cut it with other ingredients and mold it and sell it.
Right. And one of the things that is commonly done with this cocoa liquor is it goes into a butter press. And what that is, it looks like a long cylinder, and the cocoa liquor goes in, and then a rod that perfectly matches the inside of the cylinder hydraulically starts to compact this mass, and it starts to squeeze out the cocoa butter. Have you ever seen a cocoa press, a cocoa butter press, Adam?
Not in person. No.
It's a really impressive machine. It's loud. It goes, and then it kind of stops, and it goes, and it's loud. It's hot, and it's hydraulically ratcheting up the pressure and squeezing this liquor, and it's squeezing the butter out. The butter runs out. I mean, you can see it running out in this kind of yellow, light yellow, clear looking. It's squeezing the fat out.
Yeah. No, it's similar to olive oil or coconut oil.
Right. It's a press. Exactly. Yep. It's a little different in that typically they're not squeezing a liquid from a liquid. In olive oil, they're squeezing a liquid from a paste, from a solider. But in this case, they're squeezing a liquid substance, and they're separating one liquid, and then what remains are cocoa solids. And at the end of that process, where you press that out, you've got a tiny. So it started probably with, let's call it a 4 feet of this cylinder full of cocoa liquor, right? And it's pressed. All the fat has run out, and that's cocoa butter. And what's left is what they call cake, which is a hard, very, very tightly pressed disc, exactly the diameter of the cylinder, of just cocoa solids. And like I say, that is typically done with lower end chocolate. And what comes out is cocoa butter that tastes like lower end cacao. It might be poorly fermented. It might be poorly dried. It's probably not a fine. It's definitely not a fine in flavor genetic variety of cacao. And that cocoa butter then exists with all the flavor that was in those beans. And that flavor is typically not very good. It can be very bitter, very astringent, very acidic. It can be kind of really nasty stuff. And a lot of lower end chocolates use that flavored, that odorized, what they call odorized cocoa butter in their formulation.
It's cheap, and they're going to cover it up with a bunch of other stuff anyways.
That's right. Right. So in the case of our chocolate,
let me just add one other point here. I mean, cocoa butter is also used in a whole bunch of other products.
Cosmetics,
beauty products, lotion, shampoo.
A lot of foodstuffs.
A lot of foodstuffs, and also cocoa butter is what's used to make white chocolate. And then that cake that's left over,
that becomes cocoa powder,
is the primary ingredient in cocoa powder. So the point, just to go back to what Brian just mentioned about the flavor, most of the flavor in a cocoa bean lives in the fat. The same as any food. A lot of the flavor is in the fat.
Well, a lot of the flavor can be in the fat. So a lot of the good or bad flavor. You're right.
Good or bad. Yeah, good or bad.
The cocoa solids also have a lot of flavor. The cocoa solids is where that deep chocolatey cocoa flavor resides. A lot of the potential for fruitiness and nuttiness and creaminess resides in the lipids and the fats.
Correct.
Right.
And so by squeezing out that fat from, say, like a high quality cocoa bean, like the Pure Nacional that we use, you'd be essentially stripping it of a lot of the potential flavor. And so the upshot of that is, a lot of times when you buy a cocoa powder from the store, it's it's intentionally generic.
That's right. And not only that, it's not even that pure powder.
No.
It goes through another industrial process called Dutching, which it uses alkali. And that's to give it shelf stability and to make it and so it's, suffice it to say, I've stopped eating powdered supermarket.
Yeah. So by the time,
because it's not great stuff.
By the time you go buy Swiss Miss hot chocolate powder,
what you got there is what you've got in a Hershey bar. It's the flavor of milk and sugar, and there's no cacao flavor. And what you wouldn't want the flavor of that cacao anyhow. It's the lowest of the low end, gross stuff.
But on the other hand, if you were to come into our shop in Issaquah, you would get chocolate made with all the cocoa butter, everything left in, and you get the full potential. And also Peruvians, Peruvians make hot chocolate with a cocoa paste. And I really find the hot chocolate that is made in Peru or in Mexico to be quite satisfying as well.
Quite a bit more body, quite a bit more full
more
body
flavorful
flavor.
Yeah.
It's just a way more assertive, grown up flavor, and that's what we're using. So I want to get back to the cocoa butter that is added to our chocolate is sourced from impeccable, amazing beans. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Felkland may divert some of their high-end bean flow to a factory that makes the cocoa butter from high-end bean.
And then it's deodorized.
And then it's deodorized. It goes through a deodorization. So if you think of coffee, they have processes where they can strip the caffeine out of coffee, and that's called decaffeinated coffee. Well, they have processes where they can strip the odor-bearing molecules out of cocoa butter, and that's called deodorizing, without affecting the other chemical properties, the fat content. That it just makes it enables us to use a little bit of that to add just a little bit of fat to give it the right viscosity without affecting the flavor profile in any way. And that is an organic, high-end cocoa butter that is purpose made for Felkland, that is used only by them in their factory. So it's good stuff.
So in the melanger, then we're mixing, say in the 68%, we're mixing the cocoa liquor made from our cacao.
Right.
And then we're adding in the deodorized cocoa butter
for
viscosity.
Just a touch of that, and then also sugar.
And at this point, when you would add sugar as well.
That's right. In this case, it's 68% cacao, and the cacao number always represents the amount of cocoa liquor plus any added cocoa butter, because that's considered part of the cacao. So 68% is the combined, and that means that there are 32% of sugar in our 68% dark chocolate. Now, that sounds like a high number until you realize that if you were to get a bar in the grocery store, let's call it a Hershey bar, that's probably has 11 to 14% cacao, and the rest of it is milk and sugar. And that's probably, I would say, a Hershey bar most likely has maybe 55 or 60% sugar, something like that. 50%,
maybe more. I don't know when the last time you had a Hershey bar was.
Not recently.
I haven't had one, but the very last time I had one, which was maybe several years ago, like I was shocked by how sweet it is compared to
having good chocolate. Good chocolate will spoil you.
It spoils me.
That's not chocolate. It's candy.
It turns you into a snob, unfortunately. Yeah, that's what happens.
Or in your case, it furthers your pretension and snobbery.
If people were to meet us, they would definitely not think I was the pretentious one, bro. I'm just telling you.
I don't think they'd think either of us were the pretentious one. Hopefully.
I wouldn't be so sure about that.
Damn you, Adam.
Hey, keep it clean, Brian. This is a family show.
Darn you, Adam.
Dang it.
Consarn it. So that sugar. Now, here's something that most people would never think of. Sugar, we talked about the fineness, the fineness, which is measured in microns. Sugar is made of crystals that are 1,000 microns. So you can't just dump sugar in its crystal form into the refiner. You have to pre-grind the sugar as well. So they have a separate machine that does nothing but grind cane sugar, organic, high-end,
well-sourced.
Yeah, organic high-end. No, it's not. They don't use when you get talking about low-end sugar, they can use bone ash to separate the molasses from the sugar. They can do all kind of nasty stuff to it. This is organic, high-end, minimally processed, organic white cane sugar. And the reason that we use white cane sugar and not brown sugar, not molasses, not chancaca or panela or anything like that, is because all those have a high moisture content, and that moisture would sour the chocolate, spoil the chocolate. It would make the chocolate, chocolate can't have moisture in it.
I just got to point something out here, man. Now, while we're talking about that, dude, chocolate is complex.
Yes.
Man, is it complex.
It really is.
It is a complex food. Actually, a lot of the foods we eat are made in a very complex way.
That's right.
We just don't realize it because it's just hanging out at the grocery store. But just to get a 1.1 pound, $20 bar of chocolate from our website, a lot of thought, so much planning, so many little nuances and details have to be taken into consideration. It's pretty
all the way
astounding. And if you go back to the tree and bring it all the way to
all the way
to
from the
sprout,
farmer to every part that we do to what the chocolate factory does, it's an incredibly precise, intense, you're right, thought goes into it. But the beautiful thing is, for the people that are listening, they don't have to think about anything.
I know, that's
we did it all for them. All they got to do is click. All they got to do is click, and it just shows up, and it's delicious.
We got a neighbor who raises cattle.
Mhm.
She raises cattle, and every once in a while she kills one of those cows.
In the pampas of Renton, Washington, and
Yes,
she has cattle there in Renton Highlands.
She keeps all of her cattle back over here in May Valley.
Oh, okay.
There's like you sometime if you ever drive down May Valley Road, which is a road.
Oh yeah. There are parts that are still kind of.
She keeps all of her cows out there, and she butchers her own cows. Okay. And she takes them to a butcher, and she cuts them up, and she sells little pieces, for a pretty fair price. And I always remember that anytime she sells some meat to our family, that we didn't have to do none of that. All we got to do is cook this and enjoy it.
That's right.
And that's awesome. That's pretty awesome. And
because really, we're busy thinking about the chocolate, she's busy thinking about the cattle, to each their own expertise.
And when it finally comes time to pay, you really start to remember what a fair bargain it is, what a fair price it is to get grass-fed beef or to get a really good chocolate. So much thought and time and energy and capital investment is required to make it exist, and you don't have to do none of that. It's such a good deal. Such a good deal.
Yeah, that's all very true. And so that's correct. So that's one detail that almost nobody would ever think of, but the sugar has to be pre-ground as well. And the sugar, which has been ground into a very fine powder, similar to what people would think of as confectioner's sugar, that powdered sugar that you would use for certain recipes. That sugar will get slowly added in, as well as a little bit of the cocoa butter, and then it will be mixed and melanged and refined for, I don't remember the amount of time that takes. But that at that point, what you've got is everything is there for that to be chocolate. That really is chocolate, but it hasn't undergone the magical final step, which if you don't do, chocolate just doesn't taste good. And the final magical step after you have grown it, harvested it, there's actually two more magical steps. You got
ahead of yourself a little
bit. I got ahead of myself. There's two more magical steps at this point. And it is so funny because every one of these steps is super important. And without these final two, it's all for nothing. But you've grown it, you've harvested it, you've selected out the funky stuff, drained off the juice, you've fermented it, you've pre-dried it, you've dried it, selected it again, shipped it, roasted, decontaminated it, roasted it, shelled it, winnowed it, cracked it. You've ground it, you've melanged it, Adam.
You got them a lot. Well, hey,
you've refined and mixed it.
I mean, what's really interesting about all these steps that you're listing out, every single one of them has to occur.
Everyone, and they all have to be done.
Like if you skip any of them, it won't.
You don't have chocolate.
It'll all be messed up.
Doesn't work.
You might end up with chocolate, but it won't be good. Any one of these steps, if it goes wrong, the chocolate will be messed up.
That's right. And by the way, we should make a distinction here. It doesn't mean the chocolate won't taste good to somebody who likes that kind of chocolate.
Yeah.
If you have to do all these steps, but if in any one of these steps, if at any point, if the beans aren't as great as our beans, if the processing isn't as great as our beans, it can still go through and make chocolate. And if anybody out there is listening and thinking, well, I like Hershey bars. Hey, God bless.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's fine. Every now and then I still eat candy. I've grown a little bit weary of sugar and can't handle the super sweet stuff, but every now and then I get my Chocolate Jones on and I'll have a piece of I have my Candy Jones and I'll have a piece of candy and I'm like, man, that's sweet. But every now and then I want that sweetness.
Hey man, we're human beings. No
Absolutely.
One's perfect.
We're hardwired to want the sugar. So if anybody's out there thinking, why are these guys bagging on Hershey's? I like Hershey's. Hey, it's not a high quality product, but the product that makes your tongue happy and your belly happy is a great product for you.
Let me point out something else about Hershey's that is highly miraculous and commendable. Mm-hmm. There is a Hershey's or a Mars produced candy chocolate bar on every shelf in every store.
Yeah.
All over the world, all day, every day.
And it's rarely melted. It's rarely fat bloomed.
I mean, you know what blows me away, man, is the logistics. And because we know how hard our logistics are and we're tiny in comparison. The logistics and coordination and distribution required to get the raw materials, make the chocolate, and have it sitting on every shelf everywhere in the world at all times is miraculous. It's mind-blowing. And the capital investment, the labor, the engineering, the know-how to achieve that feat is spectacular.
It's so hard that actually dips into the dark side a little bit, because that kind of chocolate is
absolutely
associated with child slavery on African cacao farms, because it's so complex to that first step of producing the cacao and getting it harvested and processed. And in many places in Africa, there is slavery, literally slavery, associated with chocolate, with the cacao harvest, which taints, in my mind. It's similar to I don't know why this hasn't caught on yet, but diamonds. So there's a whole thing about slavery-free diamonds now, and about blood diamonds and things like that. Chocolate should be that way, because a lot of that industrial supermarket chocolate is tainted with association with literally child slavery. Literally 9-year-old kids sold from one country into another country,
and it's still happening.
Forced to work on cacao farms. It's a horrific thing.
Well, so it goes, and here's another. Now we complimented these guys for their.
I'm complimenting them on their scope and on vision of their industrial prowess and their logistical prowess.
But the other piece of this equation, I've written about this quite a lot in our emails, is the distribution system required to achieve that feat has so many people taking markups, so many distributors, so many buyers and sellers of cocoa beans throughout the supply chain. But then the people who actually buy chocolate, because like you said, this slavery-free chocolate movement hasn't totally caught on yet. They're expecting to go to the grocery store and pay a price that's very low, right? Because it's what they're used to paying for a low quality chocolate. Well, that low price has to work its way back through the supply chain with all these different people getting a profit, getting a cut, so that by the time it actually gets back to the jungle, like you said, in Africa, the economics of the entire supply chain require slave labor.
And require farmers to be literally dirt poor. And when I say literally, I mean they live in houses made of mud, dirt houses. Yeah.
The other people involved in the dark side, and again, we're not talking about taste, eat what you want, but there is an extremely important ethical consideration.
There really is.
That chocolate lovers need to take into account if you continue to patronize a big chocolate company specifically because they have the lowest price. If that's the reason you're choosing that company, because you're looking at the shelf, you're going, that's cheaper, I'm getting that one. What you're doing is you're setting into motion a chain of events that inherently requires some pretty unsavory stuff to occur at origin. That's just the economic reality of the situation. And you can, and you're a free agent. We live in a free country. You can choose to do business with companies that don't require that to be a part of their supply chain. It's your choice.
Well, and I'm sure in the 17 and 1800s, a lot of people in a lot of parts of the world wore clothes made out of cotton without working back through the ethical chain of consequences. And they weren't bad people. They weren't doing an evil thing. They may not have known, or they may have just been living their busy life and not had a moment to think about it. But it's something that we should throw out there, which is that, yes, when you're and not just Hershey's or Mars, but I mean, if you go to
a lot of companies.
If you go to Target and look at the chocolate section and you see a big bar of chocolate that's maybe 4 to 6 ounces of chocolate, and it's $2.99, it's $2.49. There's absolutely no way that chocolate represents anything but abject poverty and potential slavery at the cacao production end of the process.
That's it. That's exactly right.
There's not enough money for people to that's not enough money to filter back to the farmer in anything like a just or there's no social justice in that. I don't consider myself a social justice warrior, but I know 1,000 cacao farmers.
Yeah.
And I want them to succeed.
Well, and so the deal is,
yeah,
right. Well, you're talking about you're using the word justice. And so let's just lay down. Look, we're not preachy people. We're regular people.
No, we're not.
But,
I don't think we've ever even gotten into this before.
No, really. But basically, if you're thinking about the justice part of it, you're paying $2.99 and getting a huge block of chocolate in an air-conditioned store.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to get in your air-conditioned car. You're going to drive back to your house. You're going to eat that in 10 seconds without thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be totally meaningless to you. So that's what you get. That's what you got for your time.
Right.
All the way back on the other end, because of that decision, somebody's, you mentioned slave labor, but somebody's doing hard physical labor, 14 to 15 hours a day under the blazing hot sun. There's not hospitals near them. The healthcare doesn't exist. The education for their kids doesn't exist. And they don't have bathrooms with real plumbing. Like, when it rains, it floods out their entire village and their houses get washed away. Like that's what's in the balance. You got something super easy and it ended up, because of that decision, being really hard. And that's what I think that's what a lot of people are trying to get at when they're talking about social justice. Although in this particular case, the answer isn't what most social justice, this is my opinion, Brian, I'm not speaking for you, but the answer that most social justice warriors have here is to bring the government in, and maybe there's some room for that, but also each individual can make a choice in favor of justice, which is really a free market decision to just do business in a way that evens out the playing field a little bit and gives the farmers back at the source a chance to get ahead in their life. Go ahead, Brian.
I like to imagine that as we're talking about this, and some people are maybe hearing this for the first time and getting educated on it, that there are people of integrity that are going to start thinking about this and make their own conclusions and learn and get into learning a little bit about it. And that's all you can do is try to shine your light in the world, right? Now, bro, I know you have to get out.
So we'll get into the conching on the next episode.
Yeah, we're going to get into conching and tempering, which are the two magic steps without which all of it would have been for naught, as every step is. So this is good, Adam. This is really good. Yeah. We talked about the grinding. We talked about the mixing, refining, and melanging. Talked a little bit more.
You like saying melanging, I can tell.
Well, yeah, I have a little flair. And
I can tell you like that
word with flair. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What's not to love?
Good stuff, bro. Why don't you go ahead and sign us out with the official Fortunato number 4 jingle?
Before I do that, I just want to remind everybody that Christmas is coming. If you're thinking about getting Christmas chocolate, going over to fortunatochocolate.com. Get your stuff now. It's in stock. As of now, there are no shipping delays that would cause any problems, but that situation may change. It started to change at about this time last year. So hopefully that's not going to be the case. The pandemic is not as strong. And hopefully that they have sort of like arranged things to be a little bit more efficient on the U.S. Postal Service's end. But just in case, if you're worried about it, if you think that there might be delays, go ahead and get your order in now, and we'll get it out to you as quickly as possible. And we just want to thank everybody for listening, for buying, and for being part of this great adventure that we're on.
Yeah, so thank you all. Brian, hit us with the jingle before we sign off.
Fortunato, yum!
All right, everybody. Have a good one. We'll talk to you later.
Bye now.